We are extremely fortunate here at St. Paul's to have such a beautiful space to worship in with a stained glass window, to have had great leadership modeled for us for so many years by long-standing pastor Reverend Tom Law. And so in Tom Law's honor, about 10 years ago, a preaching series was established where every year we have the good fortune to welcome a guest preacher to bring us a good word and to inspire us and to hear the gospel in a new and fresh way. And this year, we're excited that our Tom Law distinguished preacher is a guest preacher, but certainly not a guest among us. You will know Pete Oliar in his regular role as our choir director. But this morning, we are excited to hear his talents in a new way through the proclamation of the word. Pete has degrees from both Duke University and Yale University. He has composed a wide variety of music, from electronic music to music for orchestra, brass ensembles, string quartets, woodwind quintets, dance bands, church choirs, solo vocal music, carillon, and organ. And so we are delighted that we too get to enjoy this morning some of his original compositions in music as well as in word. Pete is not just musically talented, he also worked for IBM as a consulting systems engineer for many years, showing that he truly does have a wide breadth and depth of gifts. And so instead of taking up more time, I will turn the floor over to Pete as we welcome him as our distinguished preacher for 2019.
Is that on? Good. 60 years, St. Paul, 60 years. In some ways, that's a long time. In some ways, it's just the blink of an eye, isn't it? And I, too, am so thankful for the people who established this church, and the many, many people who went on to give their time, their talents, their heart into making this a special place for so many people. And this sanctuary, what a beautiful building this is. I'm so grateful for the people that could look forward to build this, and those who could design it so well, and those who have maintained it for so many years. And we need to keep maintaining, because it is a gem. I'm not going to talk about the 60 years much, but I want to start by talking about the year 1996, something that happened then. I remember that year because my father turned 90 on that September. But before then, for some reason, I don't know if it was because of his age or in spite of it, he booked passage on a cruise with my very wonderful stepmother, Martha Ross Oliar. And so he came to me and said, would you and Pat like to join us? And I was a little hesitant in the beginning. But then I learned we were going through the Panama Canal. And I said, oh, that is the adventure of a lifetime. So we were on board, both figuratively and literally. So imagine this. We're on this cruise, and we visited some ports in the Caribbean, and then we headed west towards Cozumel in Mexico. And if you went up on the decks, you'd look around you and nothing but water. So it wasn't very interesting. So we were below, and Martha came to us and said, you've got to come up to the main deck. I said, why is that? She says, oh, you'll see, very mysteriously. But we got to hurry. So we hurried. We went to the stern of the ship, and we went up to the main deck. First thing I noticed were there were an inordinate number of crew members there, and they all had cameras, and they were putting film in their cameras, and you remember Phil, don't you? They were advancing the film in the cameras, and I said, what are they photographing? And she said, look, and I looked out there, and it was a double rainbow, and it was gorgeous. I took two things away from that. One was, yeah, a rainbow is gorgeous, and two, a double rainbow must be pretty rare because all those crew members taking pictures. But there's one thing I did not take away from there, to my chagrin. Now, I grew up going to Sunday school every Sunday. Most of you did. Many of you did. My father was the superintendent of the Sunday school. He taught the men's Bible class. My mother taught the women's Bible class. You bet I went to Sunday school every Sunday. So I knew in very much detail the story of Noah and the flood. And we heard how it ended here today. I mean, I knew all the details. Well, I'm not sure how big a cubit is, but otherwise I know all the details. And we heard how the ending is there, that God made a covenant with Noah that never to kill all life through a flood again. And the covenant, with the symbol of that covenant, was the rainbow. He called it a bow, but it's the rainbow. So here, I knew this story in great detail. And here were two rainbows, never crossed my mind. And I want that to be a kind of a touchstone, that often we see symbols of things and we just don't think of everything behind it. Well, there are lots of symbols around. If you drive up to an intersection and you see an 8-sided sign that's red, you know from your driver's test that you better stop there. But on the other hand, we better say STOP on it because sometimes we forget, and that would be disastrous. Now, I have a rose here. Nothing particularly symbolic about it. We bought it the other day. It's beautiful. And but I would like to show from this how there are a couple of things that can make a symbol, make a symbol out of something. And the two things are where it is placed and what we do with it. So I can put this rose in our home, and Carol and I can enjoy it very much. But I can put it in a vase on this table, and we know from tradition that that means a baby has been born into this congregation. So I've imposed symbolism on this by location. And you can also present it to someone. And that shows your love and or admiration for somebody. So that is symbolism through action. And we have that all the time. I got to look at my notes. Oh, yes. We have lots of symbolism in Christianity. And if we put up a tree there and we put ornaments on it, they're all symbols of Christianity. They're called chrismons. And when we take that tree down, we still have chrismons because we have that window with all those. And in here, I don't know if everybody knows it, but we have cross stitching on here with these Christian symbols. And there's such things as different kinds of crosses, and there's even a rainbow and an ark here. So we have lots of symbols there. And the main thing of Christianity, the main symbol is a cross, of course. And that makes sense because the main tenet of Christianity is that Jesus died on a cross and was resurrected. So we have empty crosses. Now, when this building was being planned, that would be about 1974 perhaps, a member of the congregation went to the building committee and said, I don't care what you do here, we've got to have a big cross up front. And I'm sure that they didn't argue about that because the cross not only has its inherent symbolism, but if you put a cross in in a public space like this, it pretty much means this is a place of public worship. And I've started wondering, how many crosses are in here? I'm not going to count the crosses on the back of the hymnals and everything. That's too many. But how many large crosses? That's 1. 2. We have 3 over there, which is narrative. That tells us about the story in the Bible, the 3 crosses. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And every other window in here has a cross, doesn't it? And down at the bottom are 2 rectangles, and many people say that reminds them of a Bible. So these are called cross and Bible windows. And those crosses aren't accidental. Look what they did to them. They raised them. And if you notice, sides on it. So very clever of that architect to do that. Final thing somebody said up here, the building. Yes, you recognize that. The building is cross-shaped. And that was very popular, has been very popular from ages gone. Our favorite, Notre Dame in Paris, cross-shaped. Chartres, my favorite cathedral outside of Paris, cross-shaped. The Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome, cross-shaped. The new cathedral here, cross-shaped. And St. Paul's on Blue Ridge Road, cross-shaped. So we're in really good company. Now, of course, this communion table is symbolic. But fortunately, with that, it's not like the rainbow. Because every Sunday we come here, we are reminded through the prayers and the invitation and the taking of the bread and the cup what these symbols are. So fortunately, we don't have to remember all that. We know it. We're told every Sunday. Now, let's go back to 1974. And they were planning this building. I went to Eddie Johnson. He was the chair of the building committee. And I said, Eddie, we have communion every Sunday. You know that. Why don't we build a round building and put circular seating in it, and in the middle we'll put the communion table. And that'll be symbolic of communion being central to our worship service. And not only that, if everybody's facing it like that, it'll be the main thing in everybody's field of vision. And not only that, we'll look across that table and we'll see other people celebrating communion too. And we know we aren't alone. We know we're there all celebrating communion. And Eddie found out that a round building with circular seating was prohibitively expensive. So this is what we came up with, and it's perfect. Because not only is it cross-shaped, what's in the middle? The communion table. We see each other across the table. So we know we're not alone here. That was excellent planning. Now I want you to take a look at these pillars, particularly these four that rise up and meet there. To me, they have always been symbolic of a kind of making this space special. And they remind me of the Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome, because that is the biggest Christian space, Christian church in the world. And they have a huge altar there, but even in that size of that altar, the space is so big, it's almost lost. So Pope Urban VIII was very clever. He engaged the best architect, now the best painter and sculptor of the time, Bernini, and he had him build this big facade over it. And it's 90-some feet high. And it's very Baroque and has 4 pillars and has a roof and everything. And what does that do? That makes that space special, doesn't it? It makes it almost holy. This is where we celebrate the Eucharist. And these pillars, to me, do the same thing. There's one, aside from the fact that this is 90 feet high and it's not Baroque, there's one thing that's very much different. The Bernini says this is a special place, but it also says, don't come up here. You can't come up here unless we say you can. Here, since that's against the wall, that says this is a special place, but it's open. You're welcome here. Come and join in communion. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we serve communion. We have 3 people here, and we have the deacons around the table. Sometimes we have only 2, but it's more dramatic when we have 8. And when they're finished serving communion, 2 stand there, 2 stand there, 4 stand back there, and they come forward. And this is the important thing. When they get to this pew, everybody is almost equidistant to that table. And we all converge on that table at the same time. To me, that says this table draws us in. It draws us in to take the bread. It draws us into the cup. It draws us in to put our offerings here. So there's drama there's symbolism through action, isn't it? Now, I'd like to propose 3 different scenarios. Suppose somebody comes into this room and they've never been here before. They know nothing about it. And in the first case, let's suppose that person is an ordained disciples minister. What would she notice? Well, she'd notice the cross, of course. And as brutal as that thing is, it would be comforting because she would know this is a place of Christian worship. She would certainly recognize this table, and she'd know why it's in the middle. She's a disciples minister. She knows that communion is the center of our worship service. She would notice that window, and if she could pick everything out of it, she had the time, she could probably tell while they're there. Would she notice the windows there? Perhaps, I don't know, I'll give her 50% on that. Because there's so much else to take her attention. Now, suppose a second person comes in, and that person does nothing about Christianity. I don't know how you're going to find anybody that doesn't know the cross is a symbol of Christianity, but let's suppose that. What would they notice? They'd notice the cross. They wouldn't know what it is. Is it some sort of architectural doodad that the architect wanted to put up there? Or is it a symbol of something? They would see the table here, and they say, why is there a table in the middle? Well, maybe they have meetings here. They have places to sit, but that's kind of awkward because you have people behind you. I don't know. They'd see the beauty of that window, and they might recognize the bird, the cup, the fish maybe, but they wouldn't know why it's there. Now, the third case is you walk in that door, or I walk in that door. What do we recognize? Well, it's different. Because, of course, we've been here before. We know what these symbols are. So, what do we notice? I think we notice the cross. Somewhere in the back of our mind says this is a place of Christian worship. I think we notice the table. They say this is where we have communion. But how much do we think of it? Is it like the rainbow was for me, that we don't think of the details at all? I think perhaps most of the time. So I'm going to suggest something. I'm going to suggest that sometime when you have time, and it's important that you have time, it's not sometime when somebody's going to come up and say, what time's that meeting this afternoon? Or I got to get over there and greet some people and so forth. Stand in front of one of those, it's just wood, one of those crosses in the window, and think about the details. And it's not just the crucifixion by any means. It's everything in that Bible up there. It's Jesus' ministry. It's the whole Hebrew Bible that his ministry was based on. And of course it's the resurrection. And of course it's how that resurrection affected the disciples, his closest friends. And it's how it affected Paul, who didn't see the crucifixion. But he changed the world, didn't he? It's how it affected the later converts. It's how it affected the writers of the Gospels, the writers of the epistles, and John with his visions in Revelation. So the question left there is, if you did that, how would it affect you?
For reminding us to notice and appreciate all of the symbols of our faith that encourage and inspire us each week. If you would like to continue to grow in faith and service as part of this church as we move into our future, then Amanda or I would be happy to talk with you about baptism or joining this family of faith here at St. Paul's. You can talk with us anytime, or if you would like to join today, you're invited to come forward as we stand.